Did anyone want to kind of share something about this morning that they thought was impactful or some insights that they had? Bueller? No. Good. Let's see. 1 second here. Like now, my computer's having issue. Raise your hand if you're a student. I know there's a little. Don't play with me. I'm not gonna call on you. Just curious how many students there are in the room.
Go.
Okay. I actually do. I'll go ahead and announce some of the benefits for students. Hopefully, some of the staff and faculty can relay these to students who aren't here. So, one of the first benefits that was great, and get you started with SIMPTE is the student membership for the first year is free. Can be free. There's a few opportunities. The Media Technology Grant, and that is to support individuals that have internships at companies that are involved in media tech. I know when I was in school, there was a lot of unpaid opportunities, which of course are great to get experience, but those do not pay your bills, right? So this technology grant can assist with any expenses related to your expenses while you're the internship or attending a SIMPTE technical conference or another relevant industry event. Basically support you, give you some expenses to go towards these extra things that help you. I mean, just like this is great for networking, but sometimes you have to travel to get to certain events, and this is exactly what that type of grant is for, is to support you in those endeavors. There's the Lewis F. Wolf Jr. Memorial Scholarship. That is a $5,000 scholarship that was established to help students further their undergraduate or graduate studies in motion pictures and television with an emphasis on technology. So, as I said, anything can help, I know, as a student. And I'm just gonna give you advice in general. When you are in the presence of staff that works for the organization, make face-to-face contact. Anytime that you want to work for a company, you can meet someone at that company, make face-to-face contact, because when you reach out to them, they'll remember your name and your face. So just hinting here. Make contact with SIMPTE staff while they're here. And also the Student Paper Award, I did mention this one yesterday. It's an opportunity to have your work to be recognized in a very prestigious journal, SIMPTE's Motion Imaging Journal, that is read by industry professionals all over this industry. So, and also recognition at the annual awards gala. So all of this information is on the flyer that you received in your bags as you came in, or you can go obviously to the SIMPTE.org, or of course, as I said, make a connection with staff today, and I'm sure they'll be happy to tell you more about any of those opportunities. So with that said, this young woman over here in the black that just raised her hand, that's the one you want to go say hello to. Say, hey, Amelia. Hey. With that said, let me do a quick introduction to Xandra Clark, Membership Director of SIMPTE, and Clark Atlanta's own Dr. Brian Bentley, who will be ushering us into this afternoon some exciting discussions about AI, animation, and gaming. Please welcome them both to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. You guys enjoying the symposium?
Please stay awake after lunch. I know it was delicious. We got a treat for you.
So, again, my name is Dr. Brian Bentley. I'm the Associate Dean for the School of Arts and Sciences and Professor within the Department of Mass Media Arts.
And I am Xandra Clark, Director of Membership at SIMPTE.
This final panel today is comprised of several elements. It is looking toward the future. Within this panel session, we will have
I will be speaking with Dr. Joseph on data science and AI.
Ariel Paxson will be talking about animation.
And we also have a treat about gaming.
Dr. Roy George will focus on artificial intelligence.
And we want your questions.
Brian Jenkins will talk about the contemporary state of production and post-production. And we have a treat because toward the end of this panel, we are going to bring up some of our students from our first ever the HBCU Symphony chapter to kind of give a summary and talk about how do they see the future? What do they see going towards the future in terms of media and technology?
Give us just a moment and we'll get started. Thank you for your patience.
I want to bring up first Miss Ariel Paxton. She is going to talk about animation.
Hello. Hi, my name is Ariel Paxton, and I am the storyboard artist for Noggin, and I'm going to talk about the advancements in animation. Like I already mentioned, I work for Noggin as a storyboard artist, so I work a lot with pre-production. And with pre-production comes a lot of storyboarding. So you're always kind of revising and going back over how the story process is. But if you don't already know what storyboarding is, it's the process of taking a script and visualizing it in a sequence of drawings. So back in the day, in the early stages of animation, maybe in the early 30s, the process of storyboarding was whenever you did the same thing, which was taking those sequence of drawings and then putting them on a bulletin board to pitch to your animation team and your directors or producers. And not much has really changed since then, but the person who coined that term was Webb Smith, who worked for Disney, and he worked on the Three Little Pigs storyboards. But the best thing about the innovation of storyboarding is it ended up going digital a little bit. So now you have the alternate version where you can now take your traditional drawings and then convert them into a digital space. But for me, whenever I do my storyboards, I use this program called Storyboard Pro, and it's really easier for my storyboard process. So right here is where I do my bigger drawings. So that way, whenever I sequence them out, you can kind of see everything in their own panels. But it's easy to do my dialogue and my action notes all in one section and in one program. So that way it's easier for me to just render things out pretty quickly and then just give it to my animation leads or the director. So I wanted to mention some digital software that you can use. There's professional software like Storyboard Pro, and you can use Photoshop, Procreate, but I also wanted to share some free programs. So you can use Storyboarder by Wonder Unit, which I like. It's a nice alternate to Storyboard Pro. You can also use Sketchbook by Adobe. So pre-visualization is like the 3D version of storyboarding. So it's basically, previs is a shortened version of pre-visualization, and it's the process of visualizing a scene before creating it. So usually it's done in Maya, which is a 3D software. And you take these 3D puppet rigs that you're kind of posing out to kind of get the idea of what the shot will look like before it's finalized. And previs has been around since the late 80s. There are a number of live action films that use previs, such as Iron Man, Thor, The Avengers. Basically, like a lot of the Marvel movies use previs so that way they can kind of preserve their budget, because it's pretty expensive to do all of that work and not have the ground storyline of what you kind of want for that scene. And I wanted to also touch on cell animation. So cell animation was created in 1914 by Earl Hurd, and it's a process where you're creating 2D animation by hand on sheets of transparent plastic. So for those who don't know the process of cell animation, even though I just described it, I brought up a piece of paper and a little transparent sheet. That's not cell, but you can use it for slip. But basically they'd have the piece of paper where they'd have the background. And after they use the background, they'd have this translucent cell that was also acetane. And whenever the traditional painter would ink on it, they'd take the animation, which is one animation, ink that drawing, and then they would flip it over and then color that in from the back side. And then after putting that on the cell, they would take that cell that had the character on it and then place it right back on the background. So they did this for a lot of early animations. But what made this advancement like so great during this time was originally before cell animation, everything was animated all in one, including backgrounds, characters. So if you made a mistake, you'd have to basically reanimate everything, which can be really time sensitive. It really kind of like take too much time to do. So here's some examples of cell animations. The Simpsons have been around for a while, so of course they started off with cell animation, Scooby-Doo, and Thundercats. So I also wanted to touch on Cartoon Network and how in 1996 they had this cartoon lineup where basically they had their original cartoons like Courage the Cowardly Dog, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Johnny Bravo, Cow Chicken, and the Powerpuff Girls. And what makes these animations so cool is that they were all animated. They were cell animated originally, but there was this switch at Cartoon Network where they ended up changing to 2D digital animation. And even though there was a huge switch, the creator of Ed, Edd n Eddy, Danny Antonucci, wasn't really keen on the idea of switching to digital that quickly because he had a love for traditional cell animated series. And he wanted to kind of keep that feel like other animators who still have a love for traditional animation. But since he kept the cell animated series, he didn't really change to or switch to digital until the 5th season of Ed, Edd n Eddy, which ended up making it the last cell animated series. And here's a cell of one of the scenes from Ed, Edd n Eddy. I don't know which episode, but it's a cell. So I touched a little bit from the traditional to digital animation and that switch. But the first kind of recorded computer-generated animated film was The Hummingbird. And it's a really simple animation that was created in 1967. And it's basically a hummingbird morphing into another hummingbird. It sounds competitive, but basically like this was the kind of early stages or emergence of 2D digital animation and of also the first stages of morphing animation. And around this time, Disney had created CAPS in the 80s. And CAPS stands for Computer Animated Production System. And they collaborated a lot with Pixar as well to basically make this program. It's a really powerful tool. So you could do multi-plane backgrounds, digital color, and different camera angles. So it's like having all of those different productions, processes and run. And a lot of films that used CAPS during that time was The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, and The Little Mermaid. So a lot of Disney's earlier films. So I wanted to touch on independent animation. We talked a lot about it yesterday, but I really wanted to kind of hone in on how important it is to have your own ideas and not have to wait until you're at a big studio to create your ideas. So if you're looking right here, this is Hello Boss, Bee and Puppy Cat, and Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. These kind of started as YouTube originals, and some of them came from small studios. Some of them were made by independent animators, but they really crowdsourced their funding so that way they could create their work. And a lot of these shows got picked up by other bigger studios like Netflix, or they just got more profit to keep making content or collaborate with other bigger studios. But if you are an artist where you're making your own work, don't wait for someone to tell you to say, hey, you're at a studio, you can do it now. If you have an idea and you want to get it out there, use TikTok, use Instagram, just put it out there so that way someone can see it. Because the only person that knows about your idea is you if you don't put it out there. And I think it's very important to hone in on your own skills so that way you can have an audience to kind of push out your work. So programs or websites that you can use, most of the websites, you can use Patreon, Kickstarter, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And these are great ways to fund and promote your own personal projects. And since I'm talking about smaller studios and independent film and artists, I wanted to touch on the animated movie Claws by Sergio Pablos. So Sergio Pablos made this studio called the SPA Studio. And what makes Claws such a technical advancement is that it's a 2D animated film, but it looks 3D. And what makes its process so interesting is that if you look up here, you see that it was traditionally animated, even though you can't see the animation. They ended it with cleaning up, and then they added basic color. And then on top of that, what made the films look was the rendering and the lighting. So it really created that 3D-dimensional look so that way it could look 3D. But the film, whenever they first started creating the animation, they did everything by hand. So everything that you see in this still was something they did by hand before they were able to have the advances to actually make the film. So they ended up, collaborating with a French studio called Les Films de Poison Rouge. Sorry if my pronunciation sounds bad. But they basically helped them create a program called Claws. And Claws basically stands for Claws, Light, and Shadow. And yeah, that ended up really helping them finish animating the film. So I also wanted to touch on Here Love. And Here Love was by Matthew A. Cherry. We already touched on him a little bit last panels from yesterday, but I kind of wanted to talk more about how his crowdfunding really helped push the production of his film. So he crowdfunded on Kickstarter in 2017. So he's been crowdfunding for about 2 years before he got picked up to kind of finish his film. But originally he set it at $75,000. And before it ended up getting to the campaign that he raised for over $200,000, around the time that I was still in school, I saw that he was doing a lot of visual development and doing character designs, kind of showing what parts of his film so that way he could get a lot of promotion for his work. So it was really nice to kind of see that process before it turned into a full film. But when he did end up crowdfunding and was able to raise the money, he ended up getting the support from Sony Pictures Animation and was able to debut Hair Love in front of the Angry Birds movie sequel. But I also wanted to point out that he used Toon Boom Harmony 2D puppet rigs, which I thought was a really smart move. And I'll tell you why in the next panel. So 2D puppet animation, if you don't already know what it is basically taking a 2D character and breaking it into pieces. So you have the head, the legs, the body, so that way you can repiece it back together in a 2D program to animate it. It makes the process go a lot quicker and easier. And it also saves a lot of money and time. But the only problem with 2D puppet animation is that it can have a naturally stiff look. So to kind of combat that, it's good to add traditional with 2D puppet animation, so that way you don't have that kind of stiff robotic look when it comes to puppet animation, and it makes it smoother. So using a lot of your animation principles really helps. And here is a puppet in Toon Boom, so that way you can kind of see what I was talking about. So over here is what we call the node view. So this is kind of the inside of what your puppet looks like. And you have the head, the body, left arm, left leg, right leg. And even though Toon Boom can create puppet animation, there is a lot of other things that you can do with Toon Boom to kind of make animations besides 2D animation. And that ends up making it an industry standard because it's such a great tool to use for animation. You can use designs, character breakdowns, traditional animation, ink and paint, exposure sheets, basically a lot of different things in Toon Boom. And I wanted to share some digital software to kind of help combat if you can't quite afford Toon Boom. So paid software, if you're doing paid, TV Paint, Adobe Animate, Maho Pro, Photoshop. Photoshop sounds weird, but you can animate in Photoshop. It's possible. Adobe After Effects. Free software is OpenTunes, Animaker, Pencil 2D, Blender, Krita, and Powtoon. So I also wanted to touch on 3D animation. So Toy Story is the first computer animated feature, and it was done in 1995. But before I go a little bit more in Toy Story, I want to kind of touch on the early stages of 3D animation and why it kind of had this stiff, kind of like blocky look. So around this time, I was used to 3D animation looking like this, so I didn't have any comparison to how it looks now. But a lot of early animated television series were created in soft image 3D, created with the Silicon Graphics workstations. And the show's Reboot, which is over there, Beast Wars, which is right here, and VeggieTales, which y'all probably know it's right there in the middle. VeggieTales was later switched to when Maya became available. They switched to that software because it was a little bit better for their systems. But 3D animation evolved in medium, but the computers in the mid-90s could only handle so much processing. So this resulted in a lot of the kind of blocky, rigid looks that you see in early animation for 3D. So going back to Toy Story, you can see a stark difference in how the models look compared to 2019's version. For the 1995 version, things are a lot more blockier. Lighting isn't as great, but in the newer versions, you see that the models are a lot smoother, patterns are a lot clearer, like things seems a little bit more intentional, and even the backgrounds look a little bit more realistic. But what really helps the lighting is Pixar's in-house program, Renderman, that was created by Robert L. Cook. And this program is a 3D rendering software that applies lighting and texture to an object. And another program that I want to mention was Pixar's program called Subdivision Surfaces. I just like it because for most 3D models, you need to have some smooth edge. So that's really helpful for it. And it's really hard to talk about animation without bringing up Spider-Verse. So there's a reason why a lot of people do bring it up, even though it's not the only hybrid animation that exists. It just so happens to be it so happened to be done by a bigger studio, which makes it a really popular hybrid animation, but it's also really good. But what makes Spider-Verse so revolutionary is it pushes the boundaries of 3D medium and how we're used to seeing it. So we're very used to 3D having this Pixar style or Pixar look where it looks almost naturalistic or realistic. But the point is you don't always want to see something that looks like real life, because then what's the point of animation? So it's really nice to see that Spider-Verse took a chance to actually make their 3D look like 2D and kind of mix the styles together. But the stylized frames and halftones placed throughout the film aren't just static. So it really helps to see that when the characters are moving, these not static patterns, but these patterns and these textures are really helping move the story forward. And they're just as important as the animation is. So hair simulation and representation. So I wanted to kind of touch more on Pixar and how they're kind of revolutionizing the way hair is done. Originally, hair simulation used to be very kind of uncontrolled. If you've ever seen Bratz, the original Bratz, their hair was very like whippy all over the place, no matter where they walked. So there was no real control in how the animation was handled. But with Pixar, they kind of had trouble doing, I think her name is Olive from The Incredibles. They had trouble doing her hair because her hair was long, and they were really used to doing kind of short hair characters at that time. And they basically worked with her character, kind of using their own in-house programs to kind of simulate it in a way where they could still have some control. But the programs were still kind of like in the works and still being worked on. But if we're like going through Brave was the first time I actually seen some type of texture on a character. And I ended up finding out that they used this program called Taz, which is an in-house Pixar program. And they used that to basically create these volumes and tubes to kind of help her hair spring whenever she walks. Now, Frozen, even though it's a simple braid, this braid was really difficult to do because it had to be done manually. So if you're trying to manually do a braid, you have to have some type of like sense of like, oh, okay, this is how a braid works. So that was a really big feat for Pixar at the time. And I want to say they used dynamic wires. Actually, not dynamic wires. They ended up using Tonic for this program. And Tonic just basically allows you to manually braid the hair down. And Rapunzel was another huge feat for Pixar because she had really long hair. though it was straight, it was also not as controlled. So they used dynamic wires to add physics to Rapunzel's hair so that way whenever she would move, there would be some weight to her hair that we could translate to screen. Now, as far as Encanto characters, because Encanto also did a really big thing, not only representation for Colombians and for their hair, it's really nice to see that they had different textures of hair that you could see from the film. And they ended up using this program called Quicksilver. They used it on Moana as well, but Quicksilver is a program where basically it's like you can put your hands through your hair, you can you can grab your hair. It's basically like a simulation where it's easier to kind of like have characters interact with the hair that's on their head. Because back in the day, most animators tried to avoid 3D characters kind of putting their hands in their hair like that. And I also wanted to talk about features and how important it is to kind of like show features. So I liked the movie Soul, but unfortunately, I really wanted to see more of the Black characters that was in Soul. A lot of these characters that I saw reminded me of family, friends, and it was also really nice to see kind of deeper tones in the characters because you're so used to kind of just seeing either lighter characters or looser textures in films. So it was really nice to see that. But I also wanted to touch on like stereotyping. So I found this article that was talking about features and stereotyping, and it was talking about stereotyping as a process of adaptation of a person to all numbers of some kind, or all members of some kind of social group or ethnic unit. So not every Black person looks alike. We have features that make us like ethnically the same, but we're also still different shapes, shades, and sizes. And it's nice to reflect that in film and 2D animation. And I wanted to kind of point out, if you're ever trying to create a character and they are Black, it's nice to look from real life. And if you don't have any Black friends, Black family members, or vice versa, it's good to kind of look in your own background, talk to people who you know, try to get references, and take like from real life. These are just random like groups of people, and you can kind of see how they have like different sizes, different hair, like it's like a hodgepodge of different features. And the future. So I think with the emergence of more independent animations and animators kind of taking control of their own content, I think they're kind of gonna push more of how media is gonna go. But until there's kind of more of a situation where independent studios can kind of like have more crowdfunded projects to kind of help see their ideas, I think bigger studios will follow, because big studios don't really want to follow the trends that don't make them the kind of budget that they're expecting. But with the allowance of independent film and artists, I think it'll really allow animation kind of still flourish as a medium. And thank you. That's it. Thanks. Is there time for questions? I wasn't sure. Did y'all have questions? Yeah. Well, the programs alone make it expensive. Originally, whenever they were using cells, a lot of buying the paper and the cells alone, all that can add up after you're like, budgeting for that. And if you make a mistake, then it's just like your mistakes are still counting towards the budget. But that's why a lot of studios ended up switching, because it was just more profitable for them. No problem. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Can you repeat the question? Well, from my understanding, remastering is whenever they're just kind of like digitizing it, or if the color wasn't as great before, since we're in like a new era where we have more opportunities to kind of show better HD qualities for certain things. I think the remaster version is just kind of like an upgrade to that, to reflect the programs that we have now. Okay, well, thank you for listening to my presentation.
Let's see, next we're going to bring up Ms. Xandra Clark and Dr. Robert Joseph to talk about one of the most dynamic trends happening today, data science.
Thank you, Ariel. That was beautiful. Thanks for your patience, Gabe, as we got set up.
Test. Hello, everybody.
I am Xandra Clark, and I'm speaking today with Dr. Joseph on the interest of data science in AI. How are you?
I am doing great. This has been a great conference.
Thank you for that feedback. My question for you today, why is data important in our personal and our work flows?
So, hello, everybody. My name's Dr. Robert Joseph, and I'm a data scientist as well as an educator. I have a company called Team Mindshift, and we do technology enablement as well as workforce and talent development. I also teach at Georgia State, at Atlanta Tech, and at Emory Continuing Education. And one of the things, I've been a technologist forever, and one of the things that is important is to really measure how well things are doing. And if you measure it, then you have a non-biased way of trying to detect where there are problems or where there are opportunities. And so you can do that in your daily lives. Like if you are trying to lose weight, well, to know that you're losing weight, you've got to measure.
Thank you for that example. How would you recommend the use of data inside your production environment to measure and maximize building a data-driven culture?
So one of the things that is extremely important to me is that people don't just jump on the bandwagon of using AI. How many people have heard about AI? Right. And how many people are like, okay, I've got to use AI? You know? And one of the things that I tell people is that solve problems. You know, AI is just a tool like any other tool. So if you are looking to increase your productivity in a studio, then figure out what needs to happen in order to increase that productivity, and then figure out what tools you need. I mean, AI has grown by leaps and bounds since I studied it way back when. I tell people I used to study AI when it was almost cool, and now it's really cool. And so one of the things that you want to look at is what are the things that AI can do? So everybody's heard of generative AI, right? Yeah, that's like the hot topic. And it is awesome, but it has strengths and it has weaknesses. So one of the things to look at is, what does it allow me to do? Well, one thing it allows you to do is to create content. And so if you're in a business where you need to create content, then generative AI might be something to look at. But you want to look at it from the standpoint of, what problem am I trying to solve? And I use that as an example, a marketing example. So I am going to, let's say I'm a writer and I am producing articles. And so I use generative AI and I produce these great articles and people are reading them and they are getting a lot of people looking at them. Well, you think that would be successful, right? How many people think that that's a successful thing if I write these articles and a lot of people are looking at them? Okay. Well, that may or may not be successful. Because let's say my goal is to increase membership, or my goal is to sell a product. And a lot of people are looking at these articles, but they're not buying. So these articles aren't successful. And that's because I was looking at generating something that didn't solve a problem. But if I change that and I say, let me generate articles that have people buy my product or have people sign up for my service, even though I'm using the same tool, I'm using it with a different perspective. And now my articles are providing revenue. My articles are providing sales. And that is how you use technology to help your studios.
Thank you for that deep dive. I appreciate it. I wanted to ask, you gave an overview of the AI use, but how would you maximize the profit to increase the efficiency of data and AI?
Great question. And, along the same lines, it's really look at what I need to do to increase efficiency. Whether I'm a student and I'm saying, where am I spending most of my time? Or I'm an executive, I'm saying, where is my team spending most of their time? And then seeing if there's some things that I can do to lessen that time, or see if there's some things that I can do that can raise the quality, or see if there are things that I can do that will help me along a path in which I want to walk. And then look at the different technologies that are out there to help me do it. And one of the things that I've found is also that AI in general might be only part of a solution. So we use AI in my company for doing a number of things, but it's not AI alone. It's programming that goes around AI. It's also focus groups and knowledge that goes around what it is that I'm trying to achieve. It's, multiple conversations with my co-founder to figure out, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? And so AI is just a piece of that.
For explaining, there's many tools that help the process. Could you share briefly the generative AI, the tools already used, and through the large language models?
So one of the things that you're seeing happening is that the ability for AI to create some pretty amazing content is growing by leaps and bounds. You've got you had ChatGPT 3.5, and now you have ChatGPT 4, and then you have Gemini. You have all these other companies that are building these really amazing models. And then you have companies that are building models on top of those models. So one of the things that you want to look at is that what does generative AI allow you to do? Well, it allows you to create content. It allows you to also have a thought partner. It allows you to analyze documents. And that's right out the box. And so when you think of generative AI, think of, okay, not generative, I need to use generative AI, but I need to produce some content that is good. Or I'd like to have somebody that I could talk about with this. I'm trying to come up with some ideas. Then you can use generative AI. And the really cool thing about it is that when you think about creating content isn't just text. You have generative AI that's also creating images. You have generative AI that's creating video. You have generative AI that's doing a lot of different things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What would you tell your younger self about this field?
I'm going to take this in a whole different direction. Everybody here is in a unique position. And what I mean by that is that I am a technologist through and through. My PhD is in computer science from Carnegie Mellon, and my undergrads are from MIT, so in engineering. So I am a technologist through and through. But I have found the most important thing is relationships. The most important thing is talking with people around you on what you're up to and finding out what they're up to. Because when you do that, then you start to bring other people in on solving your problems and helping them solve yours. an instance that just happened today. I was talking with David, just in general, finding out what he does. And David's the executive director here. Yes. And we were talking about, and he said, "Oh, I have a son." And I said, "Oh, what does your son do?" And he's like, "Oh, he has a PhD in Maine, and he's working on the history of lakes." And I said, "Oh, I've got a friend that's doing a drone project on analyzing lakes and turtles." And so that allows me now to connect the two together. And that only came about because I was interested in his life and what he had to say. And I would say to both the young and the seasoned people like myself, you want to connect with people.
That's sort of how we met.
Yes.
Through Stacy.
It's exactly how we met. It's amazing how well it works.
And for the final question, what is the career roadmap for introduction to data? How could you recommend a newbie approach this field?
How many people are interested in technology? All right. How many people are interested in data science? All right. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Dr. Robert Joseph. Ask me a question about it. Ask me anything you want. Even if you're not interested in technology, connect with me. One of the ways of starting to get involved in technology is to start to get involved in technology. We are living in a world now where information is at your fingertips. I mean, you can pick up your phone and find out so much information about something that you're interested in. Not only that, you can try it out. You can go and build generative AI systems. You can go and build any technology that you want for relatively free. It just takes a little time, and it takes conversations with people. One of the things that I believe is that life is a team sport. And so if you're looking to get started in technology or get started in data science or data analytics, then talk about it with people, investigate it. You know, I've been guilty of talking myself out of things because I think it takes so much time. And I end up spending more time talking myself out of things than when I actually do them that it takes to do them. I can't tell you how many times I was like, "Oh, I don't want to write this program," or "Oh, I don't want to do this because it's going to take forever." But then when I start doing it, it's just like, "Oh, that wasn't so hard." So
Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing that with us today. You have any questions?
yeah, Frank. Should I give you a mic or?
Let me just reiterate what you said. Networking is extremely important. And no matter what field you're in, networking is absolutely important. And for this industry, for broadcasting and television and movies, SMPTE is a great place to do that. Okay?
Yes.
Happy there? But I wanted to ask you about the cautions you would give on using generative AI. What kind of things do we need to think about and not do, or not necessarily do with generative AI, or cautiously do with generative AI?
Two things. One, the reason I know Frank's name is because we were networking, and I want to put to bed what networking is. People look at networking as something you do actively. And I look at networking as just building relationships with people. And so, I probably want to retire that phrase networking. It's just really just connecting with people. That is the important thing. In terms of generative AI, how many of you have a friend that you go to for advice? Okay. And do you take every advice that friend gives? No, you actually use some common sense and say, is that true? Is that what I want to do? Does that make sense? And I think you've got to do that with generative AI. People are using generative AI like it's the end all be all. And I'm just like, it's just like anything else. You want to question it. Now, some of the cautions I have about generative AI are quite a few. One is definitely fact check on generative AI, because we all have that friend that can, tell a story and it sounds really good, but it might not be true. And that's the same with generative AI. The other thing is, and it's interesting to me how all of a sudden people are saying AI is so biased, AI is so biased. And that's because AI is mimicking society. And so I would like to say, well, let's solve the root problem. Now, having said that, I also want to solve the AI bias problem. And the reason that the AI bias problem is more talked about is that now you can quantify it and people can say, oh, okay, see this bias here. But the other thing is that it has the ability to affect a large number of people in a very serious way. They're using AI now to set bail, to figure out if people need to either be incarcerated or can be out on bail. And so those are some of the kinds of things that are being done. And they're actually, in some cases, better than what a judge would do. Now, having said that, I'm not an advocate for one way or another. I'm just saying that we want to be very cautious about using a system that has the potential to affect so many different people so profoundly. So, yes. So the question is, with that, how do you hold AI accountable? So let me first say that the questions that you're asking are questions that are being debated by people that are, way above my pay grade, and they haven't figured out the answer. But one of the things that I think that it does is it starts with people being aware and people being a part of the conversation. And so one way of holding AI accountable is to ask the question, how do you hold AI accountable, and have conversations about that, and not just have them in groups, but have them with legislators, have them with technologists, have them all around, because it is a situation that is being worked on, but there's a lot more work to do. Well, we have one here. Did that answer your question? Okay. Andre. No, they want to record it, so.
Got 3. So
Oh, okay.
Could you comment on the geopolitical implications in the area of security?
What kind of comment are you looking for?
I'm not looking for any particular comment. I just was wondering what you think in terms of the uses of AI that might have implications for our security, the security of Israel, the security. That's where I'm going.
Gotcha. So AI is a tool that makes you much more efficient. It's not good. It's not bad. It exists. In the hands of somebody who wants to do bad, they can do a lot of bad. In the hands of somebody that wants to do good, they can do a lot of good. Because of the way that our world works now, we're so connected with everybody else. You have the ability for one person to affect the world. One kid in a basement a few years ago stole millions and millions of dollars from millions and millions of people because they had internet connection and they knew how to hack. And so the cat is out of the bag, AI is here to stay. Generative AI is here to stay. Generative AI will continue to move forward. And it is, there are people working on ways of preventing it from being a problem. But that is another thing that is something to think about. Now, the other thing is, I have two boys, and I look at them and I say, wow, they're living their best life. But I also look at them and say, wow, they're having to deal with things that I didn't have to deal with when I was that age. And so we are living in a society where there's a lot going on. And so one of the cautions that I would say is that, yes, there are a lot of things going on, but also live life to its fullest and enjoy life and, have some thoughts about it, but don't sort of dwell on the negatives because there are a lot of positives too. So that would be my 2 cents. Good question.
So my question is around generative AI and the future of the AI because of Sarah Silverman and several novelists coming together and suing OpenAI and Meta about using their intellectual property for the modeling of ChatGPT and so forth. If the lawsuit, which I think, has a long shot of actually going through, but I do think it might be a catalyst for others to, start to go down that road. How do you see the future of generative AI when it is only as good as the intellectual property that it has stolen?
I should get paid for it, solving all the problems of the world here. Because, it's interesting because watching how this plays out, I feel it's only going to end one way. And that is that generative AI is going to continue to keep getting better. People are going to continue to use it, and they will find a way of sort of navigating the intellectual property, myriad of issues. And it is an issue, especially for the people here that are producing content. I mean, that is the biggest thing that you're selling. And so it has the potential for taking livelihood away from you. So it is a big issue. And it's one that is going to be solved by more than just me. But I think it will be solved, and it goes back to what the gentleman that we were talking about before, is that having the conversations and helping to direct what some of the solutions are what's going to happen, or what's going to help it to get solved.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same about DRM. Who owns the asset? So when you generate content with AI, do you own it, or is it something that's available for everybody to use, or are there any legal implications for somebody else to use your generated content?
So just so you know that anything you guys generate, I own. Just that is something, again, above my pay grade, and so some of the companies are saying, we will protect you from any legal suits about who owns the content if you use our tool to generate that content. These are questions that are being debated as we speak on Capitol Hill and in a lot of different other segments of the population. And they are the right questions to ask, especially in this group where intellectual property is key to what it is that you do. Now, I also look at some of the good things that generative AI can do, and some of the capabilities that it has given, for instance, nonprofits to be able to make a difference in more people's lives, or in other fields where researchers are trying to understand different things that can save lives and how it might help to speed up the research that they're doing. So there's a flip side to all the negative publicity that you hear about it. And so it's, I have opinions, but, my opinions don't count for much. Well, I shouldn't say that. My opinions count for the opinions that everybody else has. And having opinions is good to have because then you can be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, I just want to follow that up with the legal situation right now. The way that copyright works today is that no non-human, and this is U.S. copyright, no non-human can actually create something that's been copyrighted. So there was a case where a young lady created a graphic novel. She did the writing and created some of the characters. However, there were other characters that were created through generative AI. She was only able to copyright the text and not the characters themselves. There was also the study with the monkey that was taking selfies, and everybody wanted to try and monetize the situation with the monkey taking selfies. Now, they allowed them to monetize it, but because the monkey was considered non-human, none of his work could actually be copywritten. So the owner of the monkey was kind of salty because anybody could take it and run with it. So there is a lot of discussions right now, as you stated, that's happening in that space. But I will tell you that the copyright laws in the U.S. are far behind where they are in Europe right now. Europe has it locked down a little bit tighter than we do. And the final thing is who owns? If it is created by generative AI, it is owned by the image generator. It is not owned by the person who's doing it. So that's the other part of where we are now, and those are some of the arguments that are going on. Private AI is a totally different legal area to go into. But that's also using curated large language models usually when you're dealing with private AI.
Another question in the back there, too. All the way in the back.
Hi, my name is Danny. I had a question. So I asked my friend, what did he think AI was? Like, what was his definition of AI? And I wanted to know if you agreed or disagreed with his definition. He said it's literally a software that's enhancing itself. It's like how a baby learns how to walk. And he said once it does, it's just going to start going around and breaking stuff. So do you agree or disagree with that?
So I think of AI itself as something that emulates the way that people solve problems. And that can be something that learns, and it could be something that doesn't learn. It could just be something that that is able to mimic human decision making and that type of thing. So,
Time for one more question.
Thank you. While there's a lot of growth and excitement about AI, there's another part of it, as true with all technology, is corruption, misuse, misunderstanding of AI. University of Southern California actually has shown and developed a holographic Holocaust survivor. And the question becomes one that's challenging of the AI tool and who has programmed that and their sensibilities being positive or negative. We're at the infancy right now. Whether it's a question of copyright, there was a point in time when motion pictures themselves cannot be copyrighted. The only thing that could be copyrighted were individual still images, not the films. We're in the infancy. I'd love to be a student right now the point of being an undergraduate and where we're going to grow. We won't hold you to this, but what are your thoughts about the future growth, use, positive use, misuse of where AI can potentially grow? Of course, there's no way to tell from here to there, but just from your gut instinct, you're a very well-knowledge person.
Sure. So I think that, again, AI is a tool like any other tool. And as you said, it could be used for good and it could be used for evil. And it is my belief that in general, people are good. And I'm my business partner says I'm the eternal optimist. But I feel that there's more good in the world. And if you give those people the power to do more good, then I think that good will come out of it. And I've seen a lot of good come from, using technology and using AI especially. And I think that we'll just continue to do that. I think that the other thing is, and we can go down this tangent if you want after a discussion, but sometimes people, I think, do bad because they feel like bad is being done to them. And so helping to alleviate some of those issues, and generative AI and other systems can help to alleviate that, can also help make the world a better place. And so I'm a big believer of dealing with the underlying issues and not just looking at the symptoms. And if we want to get really political, I think that the justice system sometimes deals with the symptoms and does not deal with what is actually creating those situations. And that we have now an opportunity with some very powerful tools to really make a difference in everybody's life and bringing everybody, into being, having the wealth of the world for them. So
much. Thank you both, Dr. Robert Joseph and Xandra Clark, for a great conversation. We are now going to welcome Dr. Brian Bentley to the stage. He's going to be discussing the impact of video games and the impact they have on culture, industry, and education. May I ask what your guests' names are? Actually, could you announce?
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Dupree.
Hi, my name is Oak Hampton.
So we are going to talk about the video game industry. We have Skylar Dupree and Skylar Hampton, and also the president for SMPTE, Mr. Bernard Jenkins. So by show of hands, how many of you guys play video games? How many gamers do we have? Raise your hands high. So I'm going to go back to the past and I'm going to transition into the future. 1871, maybe the first pinball machine, Bagatelle. Have you guys ever heard of that game, Bagatelle? Has anyone played Bagatelle? Right? So you fast forward to 1931, the first pinball machine, Baffle Ball. Have you guys heard of Baffle Ball? Let me throw some numbers out to you. Before I throw those numbers out, I have two more questions, right? The first computer video game was invented what year? What'd you say, Dr. Ray? 1980? Anybody else want to guess? The first computer video game without looking at your phones. 1962. The first computer video game by someone at MIT by the name of Steve Slug Russell. So that was 1962. So fast forward. What was the big phenomenon in terms of video games back in the 70s? It started with an A. Atari. Atari was invented by whom? Mr. Nolan Bushnell and Tad Dabney, right? So how many of you guys have ever went to a Chuck E. Cheese or passed a Chuck E. Cheese before? Well, the inventor of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, was the inventor of Chuck E. Cheese, right? What do you have in Chuck E. Cheese? Video games, right? Okay, so let me throw some numbers at you. 2022, the video game industry grossed over $220 billion. 2023, video game industry income, close to $250 billion. The projected income for 2024, over $281 billion. 2025 projected income, over $317 billion. 2026, $358 billion. And the projected income for the video game industry in 2027, over $400 billion. So that is a big leap from, let's say, 1871 bagatelle to what we have now, right? So the video game industry is huge. Several years ago, I was in the bookstore and I was just doing some reading, and I ran across, because my background is radio, television, film, journalism, right? The last 3 to 4 years, I've gotten into video games. And I actually saw something that says the video game industry has surpassed the motion picture industry in terms of revenue, and that opened my eyes, okay? So, today, Scholar Oak, I want you to tell me, in terms of video games, how often do you play video games, and what is your favorite video game?
How often I play video games now that I'm in college, or like over the summer?
Just in general. Well, hopefully in college you are,
of course it's
in the
less,
library doing your studies, right?
Right. I would say I play video games pretty often, and my favorite video game right now, Persona 5.
Okay. Scholar Dupree.
I'm in college now. I would say like I play whenever I can. Not too often though. I have like some work to do. But during the summer, I play a lot. Getting a good couple of games in. But right now, my favorite game, right now I've been playing a lot of Borderlands. Just first person shooter game.
Okay. Mr. Jenkins, a question for you. So as you see the trends within the video game industry is at an all-time high, how do you see the merging of, let's say, for example, the video game industry and the education industry? How can the education industry benefit, or how can the video game industry benefit from merging together?
Well, I think it's well, first of all, my favorite game is Forza because I like to drive fast but safely. So I do play on the weekends. I think really where we are right now with education and gaming is that the game engines have become so extremely powerful that they're able to help us create content to help with education. And one of the things that I do like is that you can also use these game engines to create virtual reality space in order for you to have more immersive experience within the gaming world. That also gives you a more immersive experience with education. If you think about bringing kids into the educational process in an immersive way, that's one of the things that I think gaming can really actually help with doing, and the game engines can help do that.
Okay. So as you see some of the biggest motion pictures and also television series, right? The Mandalorian, or some of those elements are crafted in video game engines, right? I'm just going to ask the audience a question. What are the two most prevalent and I would say powerful video game engines that are used today? Can anybody guess? Unreal Engine and Unity, right? And I tell students all the time, there are jobs available in the video game industry for students in mass media arts, in mass media, because you need someone to do audio, you need producers, right? One of the courses I teach is a class called How to Write for Video Games, and the focus on that class is to teach students how to become a narrative designer, right? Writing branching dialogue, etc. So it's so many different elements comprised of these two different mediums, which really is one, because you can one pretty much piggybacks off of the other, right? Mr. Jenkins, question for you. What are some examples that you may can talk about of integrating video games into an educational setting that you have maybe observed?
Well, my company actually has created some things that we use. We work with creating training materials and training applications for the government. They've been used in healthcare. They've been used in educating people about how to use certain machinery and things of that nature. So we focus on that kind of stuff. I think that's where you can really get in at the base level, where you can take it. The sky's the limit. The more that educators want to invest in, putting their time and effort into it, the more that you can do with it. Me personally, I like math, so I think there's a space that I'm playing around with now to figure out where you can actually make math a little bit more game-like, so that children and those who may have a phobia or fear of math can get to the point where it's more fun and more engaging.
Okay. Scholars Dupree and Hampton, I have a question for you all. Do you believe that video games have the potential to be an effective educational tool? Why or why not?
So I would say definitely. I think that video games can teach you all types of skills. Your actions have consequences. We have story-based games and decision-based games that are teaching you the decisions you take matters, and it's not just in the air. But we also have video games that are going to end a certain way no matter what you do. So we have what's going to happen is going to happen and things like that. But I also think if we're going to incorporate video games into education, it's important to let people know that moderation is also a thing. You don't want to use it. You don't want to play video games too much to a point where you're not getting anything else done. But yeah.
I agree with Jackie. I believe that video games can and have been helpful. I remember in elementary school, there was this one website we would use called Prodigy, where we would do math problems and stuff in a video game. And also in some driving courses, they give you driving simulations. But I also agree that you need time to practice that outside of video games, so you learn how to apply it.
Well, let me ask, when you guys went through that exercise, did you find that increased yourself as a student, your engagement within the actual learning process and within the classroom? Do you feel that you were more engaged?
I would say yeah, because video games, they hold your attention, because it's not like with movies, yes, it can be interesting, but especially with video games, you're actually doing what's happening, so it sticks in your mind more.
I have another question for you, scholars. And it's kind of piggybacking off of the question you just answered. How do you think educators could better integrate video games into the curriculum to make learning more engaging and relevant to students?
So I would say using websites that Oak just mentioned would help, because really the interaction that I think kids are wanting nowadays, it's we don't want to sit in a classroom for an hour or so, or I don't know how long kids are sitting in classrooms these days. I know how long I am, but I don't know what the little ones. They want something to do, so really give them something to do. And yeah, I think just the websites like Oak mentioned, that'll be a good start at least. And then I think if we could do figure out some way to do a decision-based game to let children get the soft skills into.
Mr. Jenkins, this question is for you. What advice would you give to educators who are interested in incorporating video games into their teaching practices but are unsure where to start?
First, I would say call me and we can help you. Um, a little plug there. I really think that it comes down to how you build the content. The basic tenets of any video game is based off of recognition, reward, which then triggers a dopamine effect to keep the player engaged and to keep people playing it over and over again. You should look to create the curriculum that can be translated in that same form to reward the player or the student in a manner that is not too difficult at the beginning, and then increase the difficulty as it goes on, so that you get the person to actually first buy in and then begin to focus, and then you get them hooked to actually continue the work. By using a model like that, I think you could be pretty successful with creating something that actually can stick.
In your professional opinion, for example, if you had a college or university that was in the incipient stage of, let's say, developing a video game curriculum, would you recommend, for example, A, starting with game design, B, game programming, C, game art, etc.?
I think I would back it up and start with the curriculum. I'd start designing the curriculum and figuring out what it is that you're trying to get to, and then begin to look at the game design itself. Because without having something that is going to fit the model that I described earlier, I wouldn't think that it would be too successful, at least not immediately.
Scholars, how do you think the gaming industry could collaborate more effectively with educators and students to create educational content that meets their needs?
I think honestly it's all just about like communicating. So we like video game developers, I feel like know what people want, and that's why like it's kind of taken over everything right now. Like they know what we want in terms of like interaction, I would say. And the educators, of course, know what the students are needing to learn. Like they know the curriculum. So I feel like just communicating and kind of combining the two would help. Yeah.
I would think that game developers should just like, both game developers and educators should just not be afraid to try something new, because there are so many different ways and so many different like subjects that video games could like collaborate on, and to keep like students engaged and not like spacing out in class.
Okay, and another question to you, scholars. You kind of touched on it. What would you say to educators who may be skeptical about the value of incorporating video games into their teaching practices?
I would say that they should just have a little more fun, you know? Like, I think adding more video games, because they know students play video games. So if they put it in the classrooms, the students could be more comfortable, you know, understand that there are different types of video games, and it could like bond the classroom more.
So just a show of hands from the audience, industry professionals and students, just by a show of hands, how many of you all think infusing a component of video games within the curriculum at a college or university can foster student retention and engagement? Okay, we are in the process of, wrapping up our panel. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, sir.
In educational models, I'm just thinking in the terms of VR or even AR. If I'm, according to TikTok, every man is thinking about the Roman Empire, right? So if you're teaching history, why not, kind of Apple launched their Apple Vision. Right now, it's kind of out of reach. It's really early adopter, kind of status. But it's going to be more normative. Can you imagine a realm where, as a history teacher, that all of a sudden you become one of the soldiers going to battle against Germania and creating that world? Or if you're in, astrophysics, now I'm taking a journey looking at the birth of a star, and like there's realms in which you can explore in that space, which I think, when we think of video games, we're thinking of what's already created, but I think there's opportunities to rethink what we're creating.
First of all, I did not put Sean in the audience as a plant, but about 4 years ago, we created a software app and a game called In History. And In History is a AR, VR experience in which we actually put the students into the bus with the Freedom Riders during the summer of '68, and we were able to combine the experience with both visual and audio because there is recorded history that is being used at the Civil Rights Museum in Washington, D.C. We were able to get some of that audio and use that as part of the experience. So we workshopped that on a number of schools in Florida and in Virginia. It was really well received. So yes, we then pitched it to, I'm not going to say the names of some of the larger tech companies, but it was well received, and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, there's a lot of work in that space, and that's what I mean by creating an immersive environment for education and for students in that way. Yeah.
Dr. Bentley, earlier you mentioned trends in gaming, and I want to know, in your opinion, why are there some gaming systems that didn't withstand the test of time, like Wii, very popular in the early 2010s, and it seemed to be very innovative in technology, but it's gone. And then you still have games like Pac-Man that's still around that we played on Atari. What's your opinion on that?
I'll answer, and I'll also let Mr. Jenkins add on to that. Some of that is also, for example, changes in technology, right? And Pac-Man isn't going anywhere because Pac-Man was the first non-human to be on the cover of a magazine, 1980, right? So if you look at some of the early, gaming companies, right? For example, you had a lot of engineers that left Atari that kind of sparked the opening of new games. So I think it's advancements and changes in technology and trends, right, that, some games are able to withstand the test of time and some just kind of fizzle out. But I do agree, when you have certain games that start, it's real popular. But again, when you have quality, right, and you have brand, a lot of times those games, are withstanding.
I'm sorry to have the scholars doing the mic handoff here. I will say that everything that Dr. Bentley pointed to, yes, the advancements in the technology often drive the market because people want to have a more engaging experience. One of the things, and this is my opinion, take it with a grain of salt, with Wii, was that Wii required you to get up and move and do things. Most of the time, when you want to play a video game, you want to be in the experience, but not actually be in the experience. So you had that as a disadvantage because Xbox went down the road of actually saying, hey, we're going to put a camera on, it's going to have motion, it's going to actually have you start to, play in that way as well. However, that didn't go over very well because once again, people had to be active. So it kind of fizzled out. Now take driving simulators and because most people do it all the time and they want to have that experience of, oh, I want to drive this car that I may never purchase myself, they're going to be more engaged to do that. So that's one of the things. But I just heard that Sega's coming back. So, you know, you never know. You never know what may come back to the forefront.
Yeah. Okay, there it is. I wanted to ask all of you, including the scholars, students are in school, younger students are in school learning for 6 to 7 hours. So I wanted to ask, is you all spoke about moderation. So I wanted to know if it was integrated into education, would it increase due to grade level or decrease due to grade level?
Are you asking how long they're playing? Okay. I think that with younger students, they shouldn't be on for too long because, like, when you're young, you want to go explore and be up and doing stuff. So I don't think that they're old enough to really sit down and play a video game. But I think, like, as the students get older, it should increase. Does that make sense?
So I sort of agree with Oak. I think that when the children are younger, I think that they should have a little bit less time, but also have enough time to learn the content and want to learn the content. And as the grades go up, it should get like a little bit of an increase, but also not too much. Because again, we want to like have moderation. We don't want to, give too much to where it's like not even, that they're not even learning. That makes sense.
Well, studies have shown that part of the reason that we have sort of a rash of short attention span right now is because of the amount of time that we spend on screens. And this is not just for children, but when you think about children and the fact that their brains are still developing, there needs to be a limit. Most people are saying right now that they should not have more than 15 minutes of screen time without a break. And the break should be longer than the amount of screen time in which they have had. Most are saying 15 minutes. So if I was to say going to create modules for education, I would create them in short bites. If you think about what Sesame Street does or what the Sesame Workshop does, you notice that the show is created in small bites. That is so that you can retain the information that you just learned. And you'll see that it goes educational period, and then music, and then a little bit of a comedy type thing that also has a small lesson involved with it. That pattern is there in order to create that break so you can actually watch a show for 30 minutes or for an hour and still retain the information that's coming. So I would suggest that anything that's created, especially for children, should be done in modules. But I'll be honest with you, I have to actually tell myself, stop scrolling. Because if you can start looking at Instagram and the reels are funny, and the next thing you know, it's an hour later and you've been scrolling for these little 10 to 15 second things. So you have to be really aware of what you're doing, even as an adult. So yeah, you have to approach it cautiously, especially with developing minds and brains.
And lastly, I do agree. It has to be done strategically, because too much, for example, with video games, too much video game play, just constantly. For example, even social media can affect, social skills. For example, I have a nephew. He has an Oculus, and he plays that Oculus maybe within a 24-hour span, maybe 18 to 20 hours where he has the rings around his eyes. So yes, it has to be strategically, it has to be a balance. With anything, it has to be a balance.
Okay, there we are. Well, thank you so much, all of you, Dr. Bentley, Renard Jenkins, and Skylar Squares, Skylar Dose. I didn't get the last names, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon to you all. So, sorry about this slight delay. Technical problems. And my name is Roy George. I'm the chair of the Department of Cyber Physical Systems at CAU. And so before I start, I just was looking to read a definition. So the definition is of this word déjà vu, and the Oxford Dictionary defines it as feeling of already having experienced the present situation. And that earlier conversation with Professor Joseph, which we all heard, most excellent roundtable discussion. Everything I had to say was already discussed. So, welcome to Deja Vu. Okay, but the really part was about being better. So, I can talk about so I'd like to say a few things about history. A few things about CAU, since we're having this conversation at this school. And so one of the questions that I get a lot, what exactly is cyber-physical systems? And it is, in our definition at least, it is the synergy between the hardware platforms and software that we're seeing today, to the point where it is very almost very quickly becoming indistinguishable, where one ends and the other starts. So that is a process that has been going on for 20 years, but it becomes it's much more visible today. And so just a little bit about our department. We have 200 students in all programs, the bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs. We have a very new PhD programs and a very new PhD program. It's only about 3 years old. And we have about 8 faculty members with terminal degrees in computer science and electrical engineering. So the programs that we offer are in computer science and cybersecurity at the bachelor's level. At the master's, we have a computer science program, and we have a PhD program in cyber physical systems with specialization in cybersecurity and a second specialization in AI and robotics. So over here at CAU, we do education, training, and research in all these areas. And towards the end of this talk, I'll also want to get very briefly into some of the research questions that we are looking at right now. Oh, okay. So this is the landscape in which I see how AI could possibly transform both filmmaking and the entertainment industry through the entire life cycle, all the way from development to post-production. We have some fancy tools that are being used in the development and ideation and automation of some of the storylines and all the fancy things coming out through generative AI. But if you're looking at the business side of it too, I believe there's a lot of it is being exploited, but through data science and AI, there's a lot of things that can be done at the latter parts of the life cycle too. So briefly, if we go into just some general categories that I thought about, which, as we speak, are being exploited today, is the amount of data that we have about audience preferences, previous media that is successful, unsuccessful. So there's a whole host of data that can be exploited, understood, and also where we can draw insights from, and which gives, say, content creators new ideas for creating really compelling storylines and marketable storylines. The second point, which was, I guess there was a lot of conversation about it, is where we see the generative side of it. And from the generative side could mean all these things: music, art, and also through virtual influencers who can influence audiences and the consuming public. So, looking more into the mechanics of this, we saw the whole theme of this conference was color, and so the use of AI tools to, I think there was some fairly robust discussion about it, but I'm sure as we go along, that's what